All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Introduction to Environmental and Occupational Health. We're going to start today by just giving an overview of the class that you're about to take. And then we have some content to go into as well for the first day here. So I'm Katie Dickinson. I am an associate professor here in the Colorado School of Public Health in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health. I am one of the co-instructors for this class. This is my third year co-instructing the class with my partner, Glenn.
Hi, I'm Glenn Patterson. I'm an adjunct faculty here in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health. I've been co-teaching this course now for about 7 or 8 years and look forward to working with all of you this semester. I worked as a hydrologist with the U.S. Geological Survey for 30 years and have been doing a fair amount of teaching, mostly related to water for over a decade. And this is one of my favorite courses and really look forward to sharing it with you.
Thanks. So here we are. Our contact information is in these slides. It's also in the syllabus. We're going to talk a lot about the syllabus today. Hope everyone can get super familiar with that. We have 2 teaching assistants for this class, Lexi and Louise. Lexi is on her way in today, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit later in the class. For most of the things that you're going to need, Lexi is your point of contact. Louise is going to be doing a bit of the grading for the class, but Lexi is the head TA. And you can always reach out to me or Glenn as well. We're going to be work together really closely as a teaching team. So that's who we are.
If you go back one, just for a moment on that slide. Lexi does have 2 email addresses. This is her Anschutz one. I think the syllabus lists her Gmail account. We can ask her when she gets here which one she prefers. So you might make a note when we do ask her.
Thanks. All right, so like I said, we're going to start by just kind of giving you a sense for the overall class, the expectations, what's involved, what we're going to learn about. We'll give you all a little bit of time. We really like to have a classroom community. This year, we've got about 44 students signed up, so it's not a huge class, and I think it gives us all an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit. So we'll have a little bit of time for that. And then, like I said, a little bit of content today. So I'm going to give an intro lecture on environmental justice, which is one of the areas that I do a lot of work in and think is really central to a lot of the themes of the class that we're going to look at over the semester. So Glenn, do you want to start us off with these slides?
There's a lot of content in this course. It's a pretty broad overview of both environmental and occupational health. The course is organized, well, over the next few slides, we'll see. We talk about some global issues, such as climate change, scientific integrity, environmental justice and equity, air and water pollution, things going on in developing nations, industrialization, war, genetics, pretty wide-ranging, pretty overarching issues. Advance. Just click it.
Yep.
Okay. In addition to those global issues, we also introduced you to some scientific and technical methods that are important in the fields of environmental and occupational health, such as physiology, toxicology, epidemiology, exposure assessment, risk assessment, the use of spatial data and geographic information systems, surveillance, and some tools from the social sciences. Oh, that's right. And then we also talk about some issues of national and regional interest, things like environmental and occupational law and policy, environmental equity and justice, which we'll start on today, hazardous and solid waste, surface and groundwater pollution, agriculture, and issues related to food safety, infectious and non-infectious diseases. Also, natural resource extraction, the built environment, how that interacts with environmental health, radiation and physical hazards such as heat and radiation, promoting public health in workplaces to try to make workplaces not only places where you have to be worried about adverse health effects, but making workplaces a positive experience for public health, and much more.
Okay, so that's kind of a very broad overview of the content that we're going to be covering. And so now we'll talk a little bit about the structure of the class. So this is a hybrid class. And that means that we, as I'll show you, we're going to have a mix of in-person engagement like today. We have our next lecture, as I'll show you, is going to be a Zoom lecture. So we have some live sessions, most of which are here in the classroom, some of which will be on Zoom. And then the rest of the materials are presented in a sort of asynchronous online modules that you'll follow along with. So these are the learning objectives for this course. As Glenn mentioned, we're going to cover how environmental factors affect populations' health, globalization and the global burden of disease, looking at One Health perspective. So what are the connections between human health, animal health, and ecosystem health? We're going to talk about communication strategies for different audiences and sectors. Quick preview to one of the highlights and cornerstones of this class, which is our Oscar night at the end of the semester, which gives you all an opportunity to showcase your talents in communication to lay audiences around an environmental or occupational health topic that you'll work on with a group. And then systems thinking, right? So a lot of these topics that we're covering are complex. They involve interactions across multiple systems, human systems, health systems, natural systems, built environments, workplaces. And so thinking about how those systems interconnect and how what we do over here might affect what happens over here, that's another key skill that you're going to develop through this course. So I think that covers most of what's here. In addition, yeah, this last one, skills and public health teamwork. Again, we think this is super important. Public health is not a solo sport. It's definitely a team sport. And so providing opportunities for you all to work in teams and develop some skills around how to do that effectively is another thing that we think is really important, and hopefully a core skill that you'll get to hone through the course. So the platform that we use for this class, like all classes on campus, is Canvas. That is your go-to for, again, lecture materials. The readings, we'll talk a little bit about readings. Most of the readings that you'll need to access for this class are right directly in Canvas. Assignments and quizzes, the group project components, etc. And then, yeah, Glenn is sort of the point person. Glenn, Lexi can help out if, for example, you've got a broken link or something is not showing up the way that you think it should. Any issues around that?
Thanks. And I'll just mention quickly, of course, you saw my contact information. It's also on the homepage for the course. There's also, there are some discussion forums in the course. Some of them have to do with course content. One non-graded optional discussion has to do with a chance for you to just introduce yourself to everybody. But there's also a Q&A discussion, which we'll be monitoring fairly frequently. So another opportunity for you to post a question or a comment, if you don't mind other people seeing it, is that Q&A discussion. That's one of the discussion forums you'll see on the course. So several options for getting in touch with us if you notice something in the course that looks funny or you have a question about it.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we are all human. And so, yeah, like, sometimes things fall through the cracks. We do our very best as a teaching team to make sure that we're getting the content posted when it needs to, and, you know, having quizzes that make sense and all of those things. But if you are seeing anything that looks out of place or is missing, just communicate with us and we will respond and help get things sorted. Okay, so this is what I was mentioning at the beginning. Okay, this is one of the things I can guarantee you that somebody is going to show up in this classroom on Wednesday and be like, where is everyone? We won't be here on Wednesday. Okay, so this is the list of times when we actually have live sessions. At all other dates for the class, you will have, like I said, online modules, content to work through at your own pace, although you want to keep up with the pace of the class, but you don't necessarily have to do that between 8:30 and 9:50 on a given day. You can work your schedule around that. So I'll give you a brief overview of what we're doing. So again, today we're here in class together. Next Wednesday will be our next live meeting. We will be on Zoom. I'm very excited about that class. We're going to be looking at a topic that is very relevant and encompasses a lot of the themes we're going to be looking at throughout the semester, including climate change, worker health, and policy and environmental justice. So the topic will be looking at how can we do a better job of creating policies that protect all workers from the effects of climate change, specifically extreme heat. And so the team that we're actually going to have in our virtual space talking us through that includes our state representative, Elizabeth Velasco, who has been working hard to kind of look at what Colorado policies currently exist. I had a team of students who in the policy class that I teach in the last spring, worked with Representative Velasco and Beatriz Soto from Conservation Colorado's Protégete program. So that they will be joining us as well. And so our student team kind of did an analysis to say, all right, what is Colorado already doing? Where are some of the gaps? And they're going to be taking that now and trying to actually develop some legislation that will go to the state legislature in the spring session this year. And then we'll also have Miranda Daly, who is a researcher here in the Center for Health, Work, and Environment, who does research on the effects of extreme heat on climate on workers. So super excited about that class. On Monday the 9th, we'll be back here in this classroom for a guest lecture on toxicology by the Colorado State toxicologist, Kristen Richardson from CDPHE. Kathy James will join us on September 11th to talk about population pressure and urbanization. Kathy's on the faculty here in the school. Glenn and I will be back. We'll join all these sessions, but we'll be taking the kind of center stage again on September 30th, along with Kristen Wilson, a recent graduate of the MPH program who is now working in the climate change program at CDPHE. Again, to talk a little bit about both the kind of science and the connections between climate change and human health, and looking at sort of what is the state doing to address some of those impacts and do climate mitigation, all of those different things. We have 2 journal clubs, and we'll talk a little bit about the assigned readings for those, but for the journal clubs, we'll meet in small groups to discuss the readings that we've identified. And so those will occur on October 2nd and October 23rd. We will have a limited number of remote, so we'll have a Zoom session for each of those, if that is your preference. Otherwise, we get to meet, and often we'll go sit outside if we're meeting live here. Between those 2 journal clubs, I will give a lecture on environmental law and policy. On October 28th and 30th, and I don't know that we've totally set which is which, but on those 2 dates, we'll have a water pollution lecture from Glenn and an air pollution lecture from the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment's Love My Air team. So this is a project that is collecting air quality information throughout the city of Denver and then creating a whole bunch of tools to communicate that information back to the public, so people can take action and really trying to think about how we take action at various different scales. And then that wraps up the most of the content for the semester. Then we'll move into our student presentations. So again, that group project, you will be presenting to us here in the class on October 13th, 18th, and 20th. And then we'll have our final session, kind of wrapping things up during the day here in this room on Monday the 4th, and then that evening is when we'll do our Oscar night. And again, we'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second. Anything else you wanted to add about the schedule here, Glenn? Okay. And then again, if the date is not listed here, don't show up here. Don't try to log into a Zoom. We won't be there. You're on your own. And for those sessions, we have content that was developed by various different professors, again, in the department, other guests, and these are divided into multiple parts. So you work your way through those modules, again, kind of at your own pace. These also have required and optional readings, and we will be working to get these posted about 2 weeks before you're kind of expected to work through them, so you can look ahead a little bit, even work ahead a little bit if that works for you. Anything else there, Glenn?
Yeah, during most of the semester, we'll be aiming to get modules opened about 2 weeks in advance, just as Katie was saying. Right now, module 1 is open. We'll get module 2 open within the next couple of days.
Okay, so then, yeah, like we said, this is sort of self-paced, but you want to make sure you're not falling too far behind in terms of covering the content, particularly because there are quizzes associated with the modules, and those do have due dates. So make sure that you're staying up to date, working ahead a little bit if that works for you. The first quiz is due next week. And that quiz should be kind of a freebie. It's basically read the syllabus. So, asking questions about which dates things are due and various things like that.
And like all our quizzes, quiz 1 is open book, open notes. So you can refer to the syllabus while you're taking the quiz.
It's mainly just a way to try and avoid having people show up in the classroom on a date when we don't have class. So if you read the syllabus and look that over, you'll be able to ace that first quiz. And then quiz 2 is going to be more on substance on some of the first modules. That'll be due about 2 weeks afterwards. Okay, so again, communicate with us. We have a strong teaching team. We are very committed to getting back to you quickly. All the platforms that Glenn mentioned, you can email us. We try to discourage people from sending us a message through Canvas, like the Canvas email. Those are not consistently showing up. They don't consistently show up in my email inbox. And so then sometimes I will miss things. So my preference is for you to just actually use my email and reach out to me directly. We'll of course try to stay on top of all the platforms. We will be taking a look, like we said, Glenn and Lexi will be keeping their eyes on that Q&A board on Canvas. So that's another great way to post questions. And then, if you have the same question as somebody else, you can also look through that and get your questions answered that way.
While this slide is up that mentions quiz 1 is not, you won't see it on Canvas right now, but it will be available by tomorrow.
All right, so again, see syllabus for all the details on this, but this is just sort of a one-slide, one-stop shop for the things that you are expected to do to successfully complete this course. So watching all the online lectures, in addition to attending the live lectures, completing the required readings, attending the journal clubs, attending the guest lectures, the various quizzes. You'll have one reflection paper, another short presentation and systems thinking causal loop graphic, which will be based on one of the journal club reading assignments. You get to pick which one you want to do that on. And then their enrichment activities, and again, actually, we're going to go into depth. So this is more kind of reference. So yeah, let's talk about the journal club. So for the first journal club, we have sort of a packet of readings that we're very excited about. Silent Spring is a classic in environmental health. This was a book written by Rachel Carson, really sort of, blowing the whistle on a huge environmental problem related to the overuse of pesticides and the impact that that was having on both environment. The sort of the title of the book, Silent Spring, is sort of a cautionary note that these pesticides are having impacts on birds, and if we aren't careful, we're going to wake up one spring and there's not going to be any birds, right? It's going to be a silent spring. So that's but then also highlighting the effects on human health. So it's really sort of again, a lot of those themes that we talk about in the class, that interconnection between the natural world and natural systems and human health. So we have several excerpts from Silent Spring. You don't have to read the entire book. And then we pair this with a reading. So for several years, we've paired this with a reading, again, kind of a seminal paper by Bradford Hill, which talks about the sort of how do we assess causality? So how do we actually determine, right, if pesticides are causing impacts on bird species or impacts on human health? And I think for all of us here in public health, a lot of us, particularly if we're taking those epi classes, some of these I think have been really highlighted and emphasized in terms of a randomized controlled trial and what that allows us to do in terms of establishing causality. And I think this is not a new reading. This is a paper from the 1960s. And yet I think some of the lessons in this paper have been a little bit overshadowed in our kind of quest to firmly establish causality through randomized controlled trials, for example. And so I think this paper is really helpful in thinking through a variety of different standards for what allows us to be confident that taking a particular action, for example, might help to improve health, and where should we be looking for those types of evidence. So we've had those two readings paired for several years. Last year when I was rereading Silent Spring, it was reminding me it was making me think a lot about the book that I was currently reading at the time, which is Braiding Sweetgrass. And I think a lot of what the diagnosis of the problem that Rachel Carson lays out around sort of this war on nature that humans were perpetuating, just anything that was inconvenient to the goal of growing as much as possible, as quickly as possible in a small space. We bulldoze out of our way. We just throw a bunch of chemicals on that without really thinking through how that's going to, doing that systems thinking. How is that going to affect all the other interconnected systems? And so I think that Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is an Indigenous scientist. So the subtitle in the book is Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants, provides a very helpful, again, not new necessarily perspective, but really kind of how do we link in other ways of knowing about the world and other systems, other potential ways that humans and nature can coexist and actually benefit each other, as opposed to having this adversarial relationship. And so I really wanted to highlight that. And so we're going to pull out a few excerpts from this book to pair with these readings as well. The journal clubs are super fun. They give us an opportunity to really dive in and think these things through and tackle some really big questions. So that's the first reading. Do you want to talk about journal club number 2?
Okay. During the journal clubs, before the journal clubs, we'll be posting some questions as a kind of a guide to the discussions. So you'll have a feel for what are some of the topics that we'll be looking or talking about during these journal clubs. The second reading assignment for Journal Club 2, which will be held on October 23rd, is your choice. You can choose one. You don't have to choose both of these books. One has to do with occupational health, and the other has to do with environmental health, especially climate change. The Radium Girls is a fascinating book about occupational health in the 19 teens and 20s and a little later, revolving around mostly young women who were hired to paint radium dials on watches. and the interesting interactions between them and each other and the company they worked for, the scientific community, the press, the medical community. There's interesting things there about communications and about kind of things that were going on in society that makes for a fascinating story. All We Can Save is a fascinating collection of essays by female authors interested in climate change, and many of them are leaders in one or another aspect of the climate change research and practice, and they're all very good writers too. And we will post a selection, some selections that we recommend in this book. Both books, we encourage you to read the whole book, but we'll be posting selections for both of them. So you don't have to read all of Radium Girls, and you don't have to read all of All We Can Save, or either one. But you can concentrate on the ones that we recommend. So again, that's one or the other of these books.
And so what that means too is that you do not have to purchase these books. I think they're both available through the library. Again, we will post the sections of the books that you are required to read. And then if you like what you see and want the book, you can get the full books. All right, the group project, this is really the centerpiece of this class. Again, we want to make sure that public health professionals should be prepared to use emerging technologies to communicate through a variety of means about important topics. So the way this will work is that we're going to post a set of pre-approved topics for the group project. If you love something that you see on that, then you can sign yourself up, and it's kind of first come, first served. So you just will go ahead and sign up. If there's something on that list that I think actually first we post the topics. Do you want to talk about the process here?
Yeah, within the next couple of days, we'll be posting a list of pre-approved topics. If you choose one of those, then you don't have to worry about anything else in the topic selection, except once the sign-up process begins, you'll probably want to do it on a fairly timely basis because it is kind of first come, first serve. Each topic will be assigned to a group, and the groups have about 4 or 5 students in them, or 4 or 5 slots that can be filled. So if you like a particular topic, you'll go to the people page on Canvas, go to the groups tab, and there'll be a group for each one of those pre-approved topics. And as long as slots are available, you can sign up to be in one of those groups according to the topic. In addition to the pre-approved topics, we have an option for you to suggest your own topic. So if you don't see something on the list that really lights your fire, or you'd like to suggest a topic that does, you do have an option for that. And you'll see on the assignments page on Canvas how to go about that and the due dates. It's basically just an optional assignment where you can submit a suggestion for a topic of your choice. We'll review those topics that are suggested, and if they seem appropriate, we'll go ahead and add them to the list, and then students can sign up for the topics that you suggest as well. And that process will take place by a deadline so that the groups can be finalized and get started. We may have to, if we don't get enough people signing up for a group, we may have to close that topic and encourage, 1 or 2 people who signed up for one group to join another. But we'll get everybody organized into groups, and we'll do our best to make sure you get the topic that you like. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So then, yeah, at that point, pretty standard. One of the things that we really encourage is once you're in your groups, we have some instructions on how to, take a sec to get to know each other, establish some team roles, right? Understand sort of, I'm somebody who works a full-time job. And so, certain things are going to be a little bit trickier for me, but I'm great at organizing communication. I can do really great video editing, right? So looking at sort of what are the strengths and skills that you have in your team, and how do you want to sort of assign different responsibilities to make the project go smoothly. From there, it's sort of the standard, right? Do research on your topic. Decide what are the key things that you want to communicate. There are guidelines for both sort of the two key deliverables are your sort of academic presentation. You'll have about 12 minutes to present your final presentation here in class during those November dates that we posted. And then you'll also make a 3 to 4 minute video. So again, we kind of talked about this. You'll select the topic. There's the live oral presentation, the recorded video. You'll also then write to quiz questions. So the last quiz covers the content of the group project presentations. So you will submit those questions to us and we'll compile them into the quiz that we send out to everyone. I don't think that is quiz 4 anymore. It's probably quiz 6, but in any case. And then the other thing to highlight is the final component. Also, you will do an evaluation at the end of the semester that kind of assesses how well you think you did in living up to the kind of expectations that you had set out as a group, and how well each of your teammates did, and that plays into your final grade for the group project. So again, making sure that we are setting those expectations well, communicating really well with your team. We understand that everybody's busy, has different strengths. We don't expect everyone to do exactly the same work. A quick little preview of equity versus equality. It doesn't all have to be exactly the same, but that everyone feels like it's fair, right? That we've kind of divvied up the tasks in a way that makes sense, and then lived up to the commitments that we made. Okay, so really want to highlight Oscar Night is a super fun sort of community event. So we will invite all of you to attend Oscar Night. You're welcome to bring a guest if you would like. We also invite what we kind of call the members of the Academy. So the EOH faculty, as well as those guest lecturers, right? And the thing that I really want to emphasize is, right, that audience is, the dean's going to come, and the chair of our department is coming. So thinking about that, right, a little bit of, not putting a ton of pressure. These don't have to be perfect videos, but some important people will see them. And so, take some time, do a good job with these. We always encourage, of course, appropriate, but humor in these. We want to captivate people, bring them in, communicate through, through a compelling message. It should not be sort of a 4-minute version of your academic presentation. You can highlight something, and actually, I will in a second show you one of our videos from last year, one of our winners. So yeah, it's a fun event. Plan to come. You get course credit for coming, and again, it's just a lot of fun. So here, I'll go ahead and play this for folks. This is going to be a good test of the AV. The room here. It's playing, but there's no sound. So.
There are ticks everywhere. Let's rewind and talk about how we got here.
That's pretty neat.
All right, you ready for our trip?
I'm so excited.
Did you bring any other clothes?
No, this is what I'm wearing.
Okay, well, I have some bug repellent too that I brought just in case, I think we should apply that to be
I
cautious,
just like how that smells.
oh, okay.
All right, Lindsay, you think this is a good spot? Yeah, I think this is perfect. Okay. Are you sure you want to set up in the grass? Yeah, I feel like it'll be more. Okay.
Welcome to tick season here in the United States. Every summer, we see an increase in tick-borne illness likely due to climate change. The CDC says the development and survival of ticks, their animal hosts such as deer, the bacterium that causes Lyme disease, are all strongly influenced by climatic factors, especially temperature, precipitation, and humidity. Most occurrences of Lyme disease in the US are in the Northeast, particularly Connecticut. However, an expansion of the area in which ticks can survive may lead to more people coming in contact with infected ticks.
Ew.
In regions where Lyme disease already exists, mild winters result in fewer disease-carrying ticks dying in the winter. Stay safe this summer by using insect repellent hair covering so skin with long sleeve shirts, long pants, hats while in grassy, brushy, or wooded areas. Should I have a hat? Always remember to check yourself. Animals for ticks. Shower after being in areas where ticks are present. And that's Clear Climate with EOH News.
There are ticks everywhere.
That was terrifying. Do you think you got them all?
Yeah.
Wait. I think that we should definitely go see a doctor though.
Oh my God, what are you wearing? You should be wearing boots. But I like them. Well, you should be wearing pants and boots out here. You might get a tick. See, you need to take some of this. If you don't take some of that, you run the risk of having a tick on you. If you get a tick on you, then you need to watch out for symptoms and go see a doctor if you have symptoms.
So what if we do get a tick or a dog gets a tick? How do we go about removing one?
Well, you should go to the CDC website and view their tips for tick removal. They have a step-by-step picture guide on how to remove the tick safely and with ease with items that you might find in the normal home. And don't forget, if you're out on the trail with your dog, like I am here, don't forget to check them for ticks as well. And you're gonna treat them with the medication recommended to you.
All right.
Cool. If you're gonna check it out.
Hey, hi, I'm Dr. Annie. How was your day? Great. So tell me what's going on. Yeah, so I was backpacking with my friend and I woke up with a bunch of ticks all over me. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so my friend and the wilderness person told me that yeah, well, I'm really glad you came. That was great advice. Okay, so can you tell me if you've been having any symptoms? Yeah, so I have this like itchy rash on my leg and I've also been feeling a little bit feverish. Okay, really? Yeah. All right, well, I think first thing is I do want to take your temperature. Just get you remove your habits. Okay, Lindsay, if it's all right with you, I'd like to check just to make sure there's no other ticks. Yes. Awesome. Well, Lindsay, I'm glad that you came to me after getting bit by a tick. And like I said, not all tick bites are dangerous, but it is important to speak to your healthcare provider if you do have to get bit by a tick. And just make sure that you weren't exposed to any of these. Okay, Lindsay, well, everything seems good on my end for right now. If you get any other symptoms, please don't hesitate to call me and we can always get you tested. Okay, thank you for all your help. I appreciate it. Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming in. Have a great day. Thank you.
Lindsay avoided a tick-borne disease this time, but proper precautions are necessary in high-risk environments to lower the chance of acquiring a tick-borne infection.
All right, and I realized I forgot to update the text on this slide, so that was not an introduction to wildfires. This was a tick-borne. But it did win, I think, in the best climate change. I can't remember which categories. It was one of our Oscar winners. Okay, in the interest of keeping things moving here, I think I'll just touch on this very quickly. Read the syllabus for the details. Enrichments are another part of the class. These are sort of outside learning opportunities. There are a variety of enrichment opportunities listed on a document that you can find on Canvas. The in-person activities, which include things like a field trip to the
Some of the field trips we're working on are the lab animal vivarium here on campus, where they grow animals for laboratory research. And speaking of growing, there's an opportunity to visit a cannabis grow facility and see occupational health issues there. Coors Brewery, there's a mine tour, so you can go underground and look into occupational health issues in a mine. Celestial Seasonings, where they make tea. There's either a virtual or possibly an in-person visit to the Ice Core Lab, probably the world's biggest freezer in Golden. And then there are a whole range of virtual options for enrichments too. Not all of them are field trips. Some of them are just websites, videos, movies, books, articles. You'll see in the list. And you can choose, and we'll explain in there about how you choose 1, 2, or 3 enrichment options. And as Katie mentioned, credit for Oscar night comes in the form of everybody getting points toward an enrichment just for attending Oscar night. We do ask for most of the enrichments that you do a brief write-up about your experience, although Oscar night does not require a write-up.
So yeah, more examples. And again, just check the website for details there. Okay, I think that just about wraps up. Of course, we expect all students to abide by the university's honor code. And to that end, you're required to complete the online academic integrity module in Canvas. There is additional content on sort of this intro to EOH on Canvas as well. And so let's see, I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for the lecture that I'm going to give. So why don't you go ahead and just turn to the few folks. We'll do kind of just a quick 5 minutes on getting to know each other. And then I'm going to throw up some the slides for the next part of the lecture, which will start actually with you taking a little quiz online. So not a graded.
And speaking of introductions, I'd like to ask our TA who's here, one of the 2 TAs we have for the course, to go ahead and stand up and introduce herself. This is Lexi Nutkowicz.
And I'm Lexi. Don't we go stand up and I'll stand up.
And
Actually, yeah,
here.
there's.
Hi, I'm Lexi. Ooh, that's loud. I am a first-year PhD student in the Climate and Human Health program. I study climate anxiety in adolescents and the impacts of participating in climate activism. I am from California. I just moved here from the Bay Area. And a fun fact about me is that I was a professional dancer out in the Bay Area. So if you are also a dancer and you want to connect, let me know. Yeah, anything else I should say? Okay, great.
And then I think you're going to pass around a sign-up sheet, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
so yeah, just make sure that before you leave today, you get signed up. So yeah, take 5 minutes or so to connect with the folks sitting close to you, and I'll get set up for the next part of class.
Oh my God, I did not see you there. Hey.
I mean, I could never live there.
Yeah, I'm gonna,
I need to work out.
yeah, I'm gonna modify a little bit. I had like a Swiss activity that I'm just gonna skip that. All right, just another minute or so, and then we'll get back into the lecture.
Try to make a little more money, still doing what I do. And also like give me an option of like, I never want to choose. It's hard to find. Letting me come in and out.
I mean, you know how.
Yeah, this is perfect.
Yes, I have actually my copy. Plan to hang out
Okay, great. Well, let's dive into a little content today. And so I'm just going to pose this question because predictably we've been a little bit windier than we had anticipated. I'm not going to have you take, I have a little quiz that that I developed that I'll talk a little bit about and I'll share for you all to do after class. But I was just going to, see if I put this question up here, what comes to mind when I say environmental justice? Yeah.
I think of standing up not just for the environment, but also for the people that are affected by environmental hazards, and also the animals and natural systems that are as well.
Great. So, and what was your name? Marissa just shared standing up not just for the environment, but for the people and some of the natural systems, the animals that are affected by environmental challenges. What else? Yeah.
I would say environmental justice is emphasizing your research on those populations that are like more highly affected, especially historically.
Okay.
So like lower socioeconomic status, like urban heat
Mm.
stuff.
What was your name?
Courtney?
Courtney, yeah, so research that really kind of focuses and puts a lens on communities that have been historically disproportionately impacted is one of the terms that we often use. So lower socioeconomic status, potentially, different groups that have faced kind of historical, and a lot of times, as we'll see, those historical past as present for this work too. Anything else? Yeah.
Conservation and stewardship of both the community as it exists and again, as the name suggests, the environment. I think it's hard to treat environmental justice with justice or the effort that it deserves because it's hard to have such a moving target from community to community. It's important to get both the the local input as well as like scientific backing for what is best for a given situation.
Great. And what was your name again?
Sorry, Liam.
Liam, yes, we met last week. So yeah, Liam is sharing some ideas around conservation, stewardship. I think what I'm hearing you saying is that, there's a lot of context dependency, right? That there's not necessarily a one size fits all when we're talking about justice, because we really have to understand what and work in partnership, right, across both research, practice, and engagement with communities. We think a lot about power, right? And who has the power to decide what is happening, both in terms of, right, research and some of the things we do, and in terms of what is a solution, right? Even defining the problem, having that be something that is kind of co-developed. These are great ideas here. Okay, so like I said, I will share this for after class, this fancy new system. If I click on anything, it lets me like draw these lines and then I don't know how to make that go away. So now that's going to be there for the rest of the lecture. You're welcome. Oh no, look, it went away now. So when I think about environmental justice, right, and I think we've touched on a little bit of these themes, environmental justice is a social and a political movement. It's an aspirational principle that we're working towards, and it's a field of research. In all of these aspects of what environmental justice is, defining environmental justice and moving it forward is work that's been led by frontline communities and especially communities of color that have kind of had the front row seat to looking at what environmental injustice looks like. And from that vantage point, right, also have the best view of what it's going to take for us to actually achieve justice for all communities. So I will get into each of these things. Actually, I have some additional slides on each of these, but in terms of a social and political movement, what that principle is, and then what that research looks like. This continues today with movements for climate justice. So we'll talk a lot about that. And then, again, there's sort of iterative methods around research. So we'll get into all of this. In terms of being a movement, I really love this book, From the Ground Up, which talks about environmental racism and the rise of the environmental justice movement. This is a great little sort of quote and bit of wisdom. It says, when we think about the movement, it's not like there's one starting point. It's like a river fed by multiple tributaries. And when I talk about this, I always want to, sort of highlight that some of the headwaters of this environmental justice movement are based in the histories of, dispossession of land that was stewarded by the indigenous communities. So where we are right now are the traditional homelands of the Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho people. And so the ongoing, right, continuing to this day, struggle to acknowledge and, provide opportunities for indigenous communities to reclaim those lands and stewardship of those lands is certainly a key part of, what environmental justice looks like and where that movement to acknowledge the harms that have been done is really founded. I also always like to point out that when Martin Luther King traveled to Memphis in 1968, where he was assassinated, he was there supporting striking sanitation workers. So again, this was very much part of this, environmental justice, occupational justice. Similarly, Cesar Chavez's movement highlighting the occupational injustices facing agricultural workers, pesticide exposures. And then, a lot of kind of environmental justice historians really credit the protests in Warren County, North Carolina in the 1980s as being, again, some of the real, foundations of the modern environmental justice movement. So there was a toxic waste site proposed near this predominantly Black community in Warren County. They were going to dump multiple truckloads of soil laced with PCBs, a toxic chemical. And the community organized, street protests, et cetera. Ultimately, those protests were not successful. They did cite the waste there, but the sort of movement, the national attention galvanized sort of this this push to understand and address some of these environmental injustices. And so a lot of the folks that were involved in those protests organized and conducted their own research. And I think this is also a highlight of the fact that a lot of the sort of, academic institutions, the places that were conducting research weren't looking at these problems, right? And so this was a study called Toxic Waste and Race in the United States that was led by the United Church of Christ. It was a really kind of, community activist-led attempt to really highlight the inequities in this case, the siting of toxic waste. So, this analysis showed that race was the single most important factor that determined where toxic waste sites were sited, even after controlling for things like income. And so 20 years later, some of the same researchers with kind of more, a little bit more sophisticated methods used the 2000 census data to do a very similar analysis and found actually even stronger associations. So at the national level, so one of the findings was that people of color made up the majority of people living within 3 kilometers of toxic waste sites, while not making up the majority of the overall population, right? So again, the importance of research and sort of highlighting this and the important role that communities of color and frontline communities played in leading this research. So, when we talk about environmental justice, we also really highlight this as, it's not necessarily a single bad actor saying, oh, I'm going to go put my waste dump over here, right? It's a pattern, it's systemic. It is driven by policies that actually structure where environmental goods like parks and, cleaner environments are, and where environmental hazards like toxic waste sites are. And so I'm sure that redlining is a topic that many of you are familiar with. How many folks in the room have heard of redlining? Okay. How many of you, if I asked you to well, I've got a slide up here, explain what it actually was? Because I feel like it's sort of one of those things that's people just will throw out, well, oh, redlining, right? So how many people feel like they have a really good understanding of what redlining is? Okay. I didn't until quite recently. And I feel like, again, that's a real failing of our educational system, that when I was growing up, right, we didn't talk about this whole thing. And so it just sort of then looks like, oh, well, some communities just, I don't know, by chance aren't as well off as others. So I really like to do pretty deep dive here into what redlining actually looked like and how it continues to operate today. So this was a policy that ended a long time ago. So the policy existed in the 1930s, in which the Federal Homeowners Loan Corporation, so part of the federal government, would go out to different cities and rate each neighborhood in terms of how risky it was for banks to lend people money to buy homes in that area. Okay, so they would rate each neighborhood. This is the redlining map for Denver. And so you can see that neighborhoods were rated on a scale from A, which is green, which is low risk, meaning this is a great place to lend people money. If you lend people money here, they're going to pay it back. It's great, green light, go forth and lend. All the way to D, which was red and hazardous, right? If you lend people money here, they're not going to pay it back. This is a big risk. Don't do it. Okay. So the information that was used to rate these neighborhoods included a number of different factors like housing quality, recent history of sales. It also explicitly included the presence of environmental hazards that were in those areas and the racial and ethnic identity of the residents. And so if we look at, you're not going to be able to see this, but this is a very cool project called Mapping Inequality, led at the University of Richmond. And what they've done is they've digitized all of those original maps, and they've scanned in the actual forms that those, folks from the federal government who are coming out and going to these neighborhoods in Denver were filling out to determine how each neighborhood was going to be rated. Okay, so this is one of those forms, and again, you can't really read it, so I'm going to zoom in. This is a section at the top of the form that says things like, okay, what occupations do people hold in these areas? What's the annual family income? And then there's areas here where it says, what % of the families in this area are foreign born? Do we have any infiltration of people basically, in non-white, non-native born categories, et cetera? And so what we're looking at here is Park Hill, the Park Hill neighborhood, okay? So no foreign-born families, pretty high for this time, estimated income, et cetera. And then there's this block at the bottom where people could write in the descriptions, right? And kind of justify how they were rating each area. So this is the newer part of Choice Park Hill section. This is one of the, let's see, the boulevards are artistically landscaped. They're built on both sides, better class of homes. They maintain their character of exclusiveness and desirability. The fact that this area is Park Hill adds to its desirability. Okay, A, right? All right, now we're going to move over to the Whittier neighborhood. I present this material a lot, and it makes me angry every time I do it. So this is the Whittier neighborhood. It has some foreign-born families. It has infiltration of Negroes. Okay, I'm going to use the terms that are used on this form. And then this is the description, okay? This is a better Negro section of Denver and is one of the best colored districts in the United States. The northeastern part of it is often referred to as the Negro Country Club. It's an old brick section with a reasonably large number of well-kept newer houses, mostly occupied by Negroes. It is not a typical Negro area of cheap, tumble-down, ill-kept shacks found in Eastern and Midwestern cities, but all of the colored occupants are housed in brick structures, either detached or in terraces. For a Negro section, it is very well kept up. Were it not for the heavy colored population, much of it could be rated C. It's rated D. Don't lend money to these people in this area. So it's offensive, right? And it's explicit. This is not, oh, we just happened to, be looking at other things and by chance we ended up discriminating against people of color, right? This is an explicitly racist policy. A couple of other neighborhoods in Denver, if folks, and actually in the quiz that you'll take, it focuses on this area of northern Denver. So this is Globeville. Folks might have heard of the Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea neighborhoods that are in northern Denver that have been sort of received a lot of attention for their EJ environmental justice action and ongoing challenges. So this area had a majority of foreign-born people, also rated D. This is the Swansea area. This I also think is pretty laughable. Demand for homes is entirely by wage earners of the low income brackets who do not mind the stench from the Stockyards district. I'm not sure that this person was actually like having conversations with people and being like, do you mind the stench? And they're like, no, it's totally fine. Like making some assumptions, right, about maybe a different class of humans that doesn't have the same physical characteristics or sensitivities. So classist, racist, xenophobic, all baked in. Okay, so that's past though, right? Like that was in the 1940s. Get over it. Well, the problem, right, is that perpetuates in terms of how people were accumulating wealth and what they were able to do with that going forward. So if the federal government's not going to lend you money to buy a home, you're less likely to be able to buy that home, pass on that wealth that you accumulated through home ownership to your children and their children. And so what we see, for example, is that there's still a very large racial wealth gap that can be traced back to these redlining policies. If we look specifically at the neighborhoods, some of the neighborhoods that I highlighted, and there has been neighborhood change, right? There are processes of gentrification, for example, so these neighborhoods don't all look exactly like they did, but if we see that, right, like 82% of people who live in Park Hill are homeowners compared to 45% in Globeville and 57% in Whittier, obviously, some racial differences pretty starkly as well. So that gets baked in and perpetuated forward. Redlining also takes on, kind of morphs into different policies. Once you're no longer able to say, oh, well, explicitly, we're not going to allow Black people to live in this neighborhood, or we're not going to, loan money to people based on their race. What we still do have is policies like single family zoning, right? That say in this neighborhood, you can only build homes that one family can live in. And so I live in a community that is a small suburban community that has a lot of areas that are single family zoned. That is a perpetuation of these very exclusionary policies. And then we see that in terms of other investments that were made and how those play out. So this redlining map, right, gets kind of thrown up a lot to show, and kind of we see that it's where kind of has led to this pattern that we call the inverted L in Denver, where you can see those formerly redlined neighborhoods in the north and west of the city. We see the signature of that redlining pattern in things like which areas have more trees and parks, in things like average surface temperatures, right? So parks and trees provide shade, whereas, concrete increases temperatures. Even in patterns of, where COVID illness was the highest. It has to do with both things in the built environment, overcrowded housing, the kinds of jobs that people are employed in, right? Okay, so I've been doing some work that's trying to address some of these challenges and sort of flip the script a little bit on how we talk about environmental justice to And so again, these slides I will share. I don't have time today to go into all of the details, but what we've been doing is working with Green Latinos. Were pictured here at last year's Public Health in the Rockies conference with some of my team members presenting on this report that we wrote together, highlighting some of the challenges in that North Denver, Commerce City area, and really showing kind of how these cumulative effects of having, a neighborhood where people have lived, since the 1930s and before, being zoned for industry. And so what that means is that there is just a big concentration of industrial facilities. We have the Suncor oil refinery, the state's only oil refinery located in this area. We've got waste facilities. We've got power generation. We have roads, right? Another kind of big legacy is that then we also had highways that were built through communities of color. So the siting of our transportation infrastructure. And this all just sort of piles on these environmental burdens onto communities like North Denver. And so what we wanted to do is really highlight sort of how those burdens are unequally distributed, but also sort of highlighting what are some of the things that like the actions that people in these communities have been leading. This is not chance that all these facilities and environmental harms are located in one area. We do need to do additional research, but we know enough to say these communities are, this is not fair, what communities are being asked to deal with, and we need to address it. So we were able to go actually, Ian and I, Ian Tafoya is the Colorado State Director of Green Latinos. We were able to go present last year in DC as part of the Department of Energy's Justice Week. And a lot of what we're presenting is sort of the impact that this report has made. So in terms of the Colorado State budget that Governor Polis put out, the good news is that Colorado is one of the leaders in the country on actually addressing environmental justice. I was able to be part of the coalition that passed the Environmental Justice Act in 2021, and that's laid out this whole process for trying to incorporate environmental justice action into a wide variety of state activities, defining what a disproportionately impacted community is, and setting different rules for how we make decisions about, siting new facilities, for example. So leaving you with some ideas about, going forward in this class and thinking about where you can come into this and where we as public health professionals can make an impact. And what I like to point out, right, is that we're going to often, when we look at this, we're going to look at, again, more maps. This is the EPA's EJ screen map. So this is mapping where there's a high cancer risk due to air toxics. And again, we're going to see some of those same neighborhoods popping up, right? And I think that the way that we've communicated this, right, it's important. And we can say, okay, over here in North Denver, we have a really big environmental justice problem. The challenge and the problem with these maps is that if we look at a different area, right, that shows up as just gray on this map, we might say, oh, you know what, there's no problem over there. If you live in that area, you don't really have to worry about this so much, right? And instead, right, this is the reason that these inequities exist is because as a society, we've decided that we're going to put all of our burdens in these areas, and that leaves folks that don't live in those areas sort of off the hook. And instead, right, we're all a part of this story and we all have a role to play. If we are not fighting the problem, we're a part of it. So the relationships that we're building across communities, the ability to see ourselves in the plight of communities that maybe look different from ourselves, the ability to recognize and address and support the leadership that's happening in communities that, again, have sort of the full view of these problems is really front and central. So none of you have to come up with the solution all on your own. If you do, that's great, right? And particularly if you have a connection to a disproportionately impacted community and you have thoughts and ideas and insights into how, how we could be addressing these problems, that's awesome. But a lot of people have already come up with the ideas. And so it's really a matter of stepping up and supporting and seeing what we can do. So these are just a few of the heroes that I've, again, had the opportunity to work with. Yvonne Lopez lives in the Valverde neighborhood and led a push to name a small community park after her ancestor, her parents, who were prominent Chicano leaders in that community. Again, there's that disparity in parks, and so being able to invest and really reinvigorate our park spaces, that's something Yvonne's been a part of. I mentioned Ian, I work a lot with him. This is a documentary that features Lucy Molina, a resident of Commerce City, who has been a fierce advocate for addressing the harms that the Suncor oil refinery has perpetuated on residents of her community. I work a lot with Guadalupe at Cultivando, and a bunch of different organizations have been leading, kind of using the courts and suing the refinery for its repeated violations of environmental laws. Yeah, I think I'll leave this up here, and I think it's apropos in the moment that we find ourselves in as a country. I like to highlight this. This is another one of my just like top 10 favorite books of all time. The Sum of Us. And so I'll read Heather McGhee's quote. It's become fashionable to say, trust Black women and to root for the leadership of women of color. But the truth isn't that there's some innate magic within us. It's that the social and economic and cultural conditions that have been imposed on people at the base of the social hierarchy have given us the clearest view of the whole system. We need leaders who see color, who recognize the profound impact social hierarchies have had and continue to have on our national well-being, and who create new visions for how we can recognize our American diversity as the asset that it is. That resonates a lot with me right now. So again, just highlighting that this isn't just one level, right? We'll often talk about the social ecological model, meaning that we need to kind of have change at all of these different scales. So some things that you can do as individuals in educating yourself, diversifying the media that you listen to. Sure, go ahead and do those things like recycling, but don't feel like just because you've thrown the bottle in the right bin, you're all done, right? Keep going. At the community level, engaging with partners, listening to the stories and advocating for change in anti-racist practices within our various organizations, including here within the School of Public Health. And then at that policy level, right? So really looking up and seeing where we can intervene to make the structures that we operate in more just, finding your legislators. It's an election year, please vote. And advocating for all communities. I think sometimes these are some examples of, sort of that NIMBY. We can sometimes, particularly again, speaking for communities like the ones that I come from, can be really good at getting up and mobilizing and say, actually, no, we don't want that new compost facility here. Not necessarily as good as following that fight and saying, if we don't want it here and we don't think it's okay for our kids, why do we think it's okay for the kids that live in that neighborhood, right? So following the fight, advocating for all our communities, not just the ones that are right in our backyard. And then this is again just a little preview of one of the readings from the second assigned reading, an essay in All of Us, or in All We Can Save, called Wakanda Doesn't Have Suburbs. I think it's a cultural thing too, right? Seeing examples of what a thriving, beneficial relationship between humans and the planet might look like. So yeah, thinking about, not just focusing on those negative stories, but really trying to tell that positive vision for where we might go. So I'm going to end on that note. I think we're got the next class coming in, but like I said, no class in this room for another couple of weeks. Check the syllabus, but we'll see you on Zoom next Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.
Did the sign-in sheet get all around and captured again?
If you haven't signed in, make sure that you come find Lexi and sign in.
Okay, and as you leave, keep in mind that there's more to Module 1 than just these live lectures we've had today. There are 2 more lectures, but they're online. So go to Canvas, go to Module 1, and you'll see the rest of Module 1 there. Thank you.
certificate of integrity. And you did it last year.